We don't live in caves anymore, but much of the way that we think is the same as it was thousands of years ago. There was a study done recently that had an interesting result. What they found was that companies that have cultures that resemble the way that we were many, many years ago do better than companies that don't. We have primitive parts of our brains, and that part of our brain makes sure that we're always looking out for opportunities to increase our well-being or to look for safety. So think about this as we talk through this today, that those organizations that can create that safety for their employees will do better than those organizations who do not. The job of a leader is to create a circle of safety. And for those employees that are in the circle of safety, they feel less threat. They feel safer. They feel like they can concentrate on being more productive and not worrying about things. They're better able to share ideas, share information, and they know when they're in the circle of safety. They can feel it. They don't feel like they have to watch their backs all the time. They feel like their superiors are looking out for them. Now, if somebody is outside this circle of safety, they don't feel like that at all. They feel like they have to fend for themselves. They form silos. They become very political. It is very, very difficult for them to operate outside of that circle of safety. So what can we do as leaders to make sure that we have this circle of safety? We can make sure that we build cultures that are supportive and to ensure that our employees feel safe. Whitehall studies. The Whitehall studies is a series of studies that started in the late 60s and lasted all the way through today and is still ongoing. It's a set of assessments to try to figure out if there's a connection between mortality and social status. And what they found was counterintuitive. We tend to believe that the higher you are in an organization, the more stress you have. That's not what they found. They found the opposite. They actually found that those on the lower levels have 3 times the level of stress and mortality than those in higher levels within a company. And the reason is interesting. The reason is because of control, not demands. You would think it would be demands because of their job. It's not. It's because of the level of control that they have. So the way to create a healthy work environment is to make sure that your staff has autonomy, can make their own decisions, that they have control. EDSO. EDSO is an acronym. It stands for endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are chemicals that help us survive. Endorphins and dopamine are the selfish chemicals. They're the ones that help us make sure that we have enough food and sufficient shelter. They're the chemicals of progress. So when we find something we've been looking for, or finish a task, or complete a goal, it makes us feel good. Serotonin and oxytocin are the selfless chemicals. They're the ones that want to make us work together as a team. They're the ones that make us feel good when we trust other people, when there's friendship there, and when we feel valued. Serotonin and oxytocin give us this feeling of belonging, and they make us want to do good things for other people. So let's take a look at each one of these individually. The first one is endorphins. Endorphins mask pain. That's their purpose in our bodies. Endorphins are responsible for the runner's high. Endorphins also are released when we laugh. So if you guys are ever in a tense situation, maybe you're in a meeting that's really, really tense, use some levity, and it'll decrease the level of tension and stress in the meeting. The next one is dopamine. Dopamine is there when we complete a goal or achieve a milestone. It gives us that feeling of satisfaction. It makes us a goal-oriented species that really wants to progress. But there's a danger with dopamine. It's highly addictive. Alcohol, cocaine, nicotine, gambling, all these things release dopamine in our bodies. but so does checking text messages, checking emails, and social media. But none of us are addicted to that, so we don't have to worry about that. Next is serotonin. Serotonin is the backbone of that circle of safety. It's the chemical that makes us want to serve other people. So whether you're a boss, a coach, a parent, it gives us that feeling of responsibility to other people. And if you're the player, the child, or the employee, it makes you want to make that person proud. It makes you want to work hard for that person. So serotonin is very, very important. But there's something interesting about serotonin, and that is it gives us that feeling of accountability, but you can only be accountable to people. You can't be accountable to numbers. Let that sink in for a second. Human beings can only feel accountability to other people. They can never feel accountability to numbers. And then finally, oxytocin. So oxytocin is the chemical of love and friendship. So when we're hanging out with our tribe, we love it. We feel so good. The oxytocin is flowing. Oxytocin is also long-lasting. And so what that means is the more time you spend with somebody, the stronger bond you have with them. And something interesting about oxytocin also is it's released upon physical contact. So when you hug somebody, it feels good because of oxytocin. It's why children like to touch and hug their mothers. It's why players like to high five and fist bump their teammates. Cortisol. Cortisol is a little bit different than the prior four chemicals we just talked about. It also helps us with our survival, but in a different way. When a gazelle feels that a lion is approaching through the grass, it goes in high alert. That's cortisol teeming through its body, getting it ready to take action. Now in our modern world of nice offices like this, that have comfortable chairs and carpeting, we don't have these types of dangers that we have out in the wild. There's no lion lurking around the corner, I don't think. But we feel the same. Our bodies react the same. We don't know the difference. And so it's important to understand that even though some of that may be imagined, there is no lion or saber-toothed tiger around the corner, the stress that our bodies feel is no different. We feel exactly the same, regardless. Leaders often feel that the problem in their companies is the people. It's not the people. The problem is the environment. With dopamine making us addicts and various chemicals streaming through our bodies, we've short-circuited our natural abilities and our natural systems. And so we have a situation where it's like driving a snowmobile in the desert. It will run in the desert, it just won't run very well. And so as leaders, we need to understand that the way you overcome this is through trust. You have to build trust with your team. It's the lubricant of the human engine. And when you build that trust, it's like putting the snowmobile back on the snow. So where did all these problems in the workplace with stress start? Well, we have to go all the way back to World War II. So in the Great Depression, which was right before World War II, it was a very, very difficult time for those of us in the United States. But we had to come together as a country to prepare for and fight in World War II. And we did very successfully. So coming out of that, we felt a lot of unity in the United States. And so as the 50s started, when somebody went to work for a company, they felt they were going to work for that company for the rest of their lives. And the company felt the exact same way. There was that sense of commitment and unity. Well, the baby boomers, who started to be born in 1946, was the beginning of the boom, they were a little bit different. Whereas the greatest generation, which was before them, it was all about commitment, it was all about serving other people. The boomers were different. They were about serving themselves. They grew up in an environment that was quite different. So what happened with the boomers is in the 60s, they were teenagers. So they rebelled against status quo, as you guys know. In the 70s, it was all about me instead of we. And in the 80s, the boomers started to move into very high positions in politics and business and had a huge, huge impact on the world going forward. On August 1st, 1981, Ronald Reagan laid off 11,000 air traffic controllers who had been striking. And when he did that, he inadvertently sent a message to businesses that layoffs are okay. Now, layoffs actually did occur before the 80s, but after the 80s, they started to occur a lot more frequently. The message he sent was that it was okay to put money before people. And the problem with that is we started to see each other as customers, employees, shareholders, instead of people. When that started, abstraction began. The death of one person is a tragedy, said Joseph Stalin. But the death of 1 million people is a statistic. Here's a little test I want you guys to take. Tell me which of these two stories evokes more emotion from you. So the first one is, there's a young girl, teenager, she's driving in her car, she's beautiful, she's very athletic, she's about to go to college, and she's hit head on by a drunk driver and killed. The other story is, there's a genocide in a far-off country, and there's 100,000 people killed. Now, for most people, the first story of the teenage girl is going to evoke more emotion. It's more personal. It's not just a number. Abstraction is dangerous. Abstraction is something that we as leaders have to fight every single day. And how do we do this? A couple ways. You have to bring people together. People cannot form strong bonds with each other virtually. Sorry, Facebook. Not possible. But it's the reason why Melissa Mayer at Yahoo decided to discontinue their work-at-home policy. She wanted people to be together. Keep the numbers manageable. There's a famous number called Dunbar's number. You guys all know this number, whether you know it or not. It's 150. And it's the number of close relationships we can have. When you have more than 150 close relationships, the connections start to falter a little bit. We as human beings were not designed to have more than 150 relationships. It's the reason that W.L. Gore expands to another office every time one of their departments grows beyond 150 people. Meet your customers and workmates. As human beings, we're inspired and motivated to do better work for people that we know. And finally, give your time, not just your money. We put a premium on time. If you had a friend come over and help you move all Saturday, how would you feel about that versus if that same friend said, you know what, I'll just give you $25 to help you cover the cost of the moving truck? It's very, very different. Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs was on top of the world in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They could do no wrong. They were the gold standard for investment banks on Wall Street. Everybody wanted to work there. They had a fantastic culture. But then in the 90s, something started to change. They started to focus on the numbers, on performance, on short-term results and strategies. They no longer thought in terms of building these long-term relationships with clients. And after the recession, the recent recession, when Goldman paid their executives a bonus after receiving bailout money from the government, the way we felt about them was not, hey, this is a fantastic company with a great culture. It was more like, these guys are a bunch of crooks. So what happened? They switched. They switched from being about values and beliefs and character to being about performance and numbers. And when that happens, employees feel vulnerable. They feel like they have to watch their backs and fend for themselves. Whereas in a culture where you don't have that in a strong culture, the employees believe in their leaders. They believe that the leaders have their backs. They believe that their colleagues are looking out for them. So it's very, very different. Performance in companies, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. But if you have a strong, supportive culture, that's something that employees can always depend on. This is Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman is a Nobel Prize-winning economist who taught at the University of Chicago. Milton Friedman also wrote a very popular paper that was published in the New York Times in 1970. And in that paper, he introduced the concept of shareholder value. Shareholder value basically says that corporations exist to make money, and they should try to make as much money as they possibly can. He was very, very influential. And for many, many years after that, governments and businesses were influenced by that doctrine. The problem, though, was that it was wrong. There's a growing body of evidence that shows that those companies that focus on building a great supportive culture do better than those organizations that focus solely on creating shareholder value. We are biologically designed to work together. And when we work together as a team, when we feel safe, we can do great things. But there's something interesting about working together. It's not the achievement that we remember. It's the camaraderie that we remember. Our best days at work are those days when we had to come together as a team and work hard to overcome some obstacle. Those are the days that we remember. Leadership is not about doing less. Leadership is about doing more. Leadership is a responsibility. It's about working hard. It's about time and energy. For all of us to be leaders, we have to make a commitment to serving other people. We have to make a commitment to bettering the well-being of those that we serve. We have to make a commitment to allowing them to eat first. Indeed, the greatest leaders in the world eat last. Thank you.